So we're here to really start talking about what I think is the modern day toxic nature of politics and the ability of politicians increasingly in a kind of post-truth world to spin a big lie and consistently spin the big lie even when it's been pointed out, time and time again that what they're saying is fundamentally untrue. And of course it's timely because we were talking about topics at the end of last year for politics in the pub, and we were discussing, one of the things we were thinking was interesting was not only what's the reality of the renewables market and to what extent was the loss of power in South Australia due to the fact that that state has the far and away the greatest share of renewables, and what's actually the truth. And we were discussing, that's a fascinating topic because we've got the kind of deeply interesting analysis about what's going wrong in our electricity market that is producing blackouts. But we also have this whole layer of political spin and lies and agendas that gets placed on top of it. And when these two fascinating topics combine, you've got, if you like, the definition of politics in the 21st century. So look, I'm going to deal in my somewhat more cursory manner with what I understand to be the reasons for what's gone on in South Australia in particular, both in the storms at the end of last year when we saw all those images of the power lines down and the interconnectors weren't working and then there was a blackout, and then again on the weekend that just passed, a weekend when Australia, on one day of the year, or one day of the weekend, Australia had the 15 hottest places anywhere on the planet. That's an extraordinary thought. You know, there is still the Sahara, and a good many of those, in fact, were in New South Wales. It is mind-blowing to think that. And then, of course, what was the response from our federal politicians? Well, one of them went and brought a lump of coal into the parliament and said that's how we fix that problem. You'd almost think he was on a different planet, wouldn't you? But it is, it's crucially important. I'm a Greens MP. It's crucially important that we defend renewables, but I think it's almost equally important that we look at the way that lies are playing out in politics now and why people use them, why they get away with them, and why we have a serial liar, a deeply offensive individual who is the President of the United States. And you could probably apply a similar analysis to a whole raft of domestic leaders that we have in Australia as well. So when the federal government last year just out and out lied and said that those blackouts that happened after that, extraordinary, almost, once in a generation storm, when they said that those blackouts were caused as a result of the excessive reliance on renewables in South Australia, they knew when they made that statement, they knew when they made that statement that it was a lie. Because they had received advice from the National Energy Regulator, AEMO, I think is the acronym. They'd received advice that said directly the contrary. And they would have known, as sure as night follows day, as sure as power peaks drop, they would have known that the truth would get out. But they just didn't care. They went in and they generated headlines and they generated lies, and they said the failure for the power was the failure of renewables because they wanted to generate a political meme, a political concept, a big, easily digestible factoid that those of us who actually were interested in truth would potentially have to spend the next 4 years deconstructing and pulling apart and then re-informing the public, if you like, what the actual truth was. And they knew it. That's why I would say that lying in politics has now taken on a whole new importance. It's actually the strategy. They will sit down and have meetings, and you've got a big pile of truth on one side and a convenient lie on the other. And the discussion isn't about will we get caught out. The discussion is about how we can change the debate. Should we use truth or a big fat lie? And it's almost as though there's a moral ambiguity there or not even ambiguity, a moral neutrality in their eyes between selling a lie and telling the truth. It's about outcome oriented. It's about changing the debate regardless of the truth. Now, it used to be, and I've been in the New South Wales politics now since the end of 2010. And when I came in, I thought, well, obviously one of the key jobs you do as a kind of opposition, progressive, agitator, if you like, politician, one of the key things you do is you search for documents, you search for records, you search for truth, and then you go out and you catch your opponents out in a big lie. And it's a great political strategy, a tried and true strategy for those opponents to power. You think about someone like Nixon, brought down because he was lying about what he was doing. You think about people like a series of political leaders that in the 1970s and 1980s were brought down because they misspoke in answering a question in Parliament. I mean, can anybody seriously think now that we would get the scalp of a senior politician simply because, and I put simply because in inverted commas, they lied in giving an answer in Parliament? Does anybody seriously think that one big fat lie in Parliament that you were found out about, unless it was about some sexual dalliance perhaps, but a big fat lie in Parliament, knowing intentional lie in Parliament, that was political suicide. That was the end of a political career in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the first half of the 90s. But it's like a weekly occurrence in Australian politics now. So something that would have destroyed a politician's credibility in an instant before is now just part of political background noise. Now it seems, Donald Trump, Malcolm Turnbull can pile lie after lie after lie. And the real challenge for them is to get ahead of the accountability. While we're here today, as we discussed at the end of last year, trying to get the facts right about the lie in December, they've moved on. They've just had a new lie about what happened on the weekend. So what lie are we addressing here today? And that's where they want it to be. You keep generating new lies around a consistent theme, that renewables are bad and coal is good, and hopefully your opponents will get trapped, in their eyes, into debunking last month's lie, which they've moved on from. And so have the papers, and so has the internet. And we'll be here in Politics in the Pub in February 2017 debunking a lie from December 2016 that the headlines have moved on from. And so we've got to think about how we respond to that politics. We've got to make sure, of course, that we fact check. Of course, that we point out the lies. But we also can't get bogged down in pointing out the lies and just pointing out the lies. And we can't think that a gotcha moment is going to destroy our opponents. They're out there spinning their version of what they at least pretend to be the truth. We need to point out their lies, but fundamentally we need to be generating our own version of the truth. And we need to be seizing onto the truth and telling it in a way that captures the headlines and captures people's imaginations. And that's our challenge. We're not going to destroy these people. We're not going to change the world by gotcha moments. Politics doesn't seem to work that way anymore. Of course, let's do it. Let's point out the lies. But we need to be far more committed to telling our version and inspiring people and capturing the headlines and the imagination and have them respond to it. So, when Malcolm Turnbull and I think it was Freudenberg, I can't remember who it was the minister last year, came out after the South Australian storms and said, okay, a bunch of South Australians lost their power for a couple of hours and it's all the fault of renewable energy. They had a couple of facts to work with. They had the fact that South Australia has the largest amount of renewable energy. And they had the fact that a bunch of South Australians lost power. And they said, well, let's just join A and B and get out. That's a simple message. And we'll convince everybody that the loss of power was a result of the large amount of renewables. And they just did it. And they didn't worry about any niceties. And of course, we've now seen the FOI documents that have been produced that the government had when it came out and told that lie. And I'll torture you a little by reading the advice that the government was actually given. Okay, so this is the advice they had in their hand, and they went to a press conference and they went into Parliament and said it's all about renewables. The advice was, and you can tell when the advice was given. Based on preliminary information, the cause of yesterday's blackout was a cascading event. The initial event was the loss of 4 major transmission lines caused by high wind conditions. This was followed by the Torrens Island gas power station shutting down shortly afterwards, the biggest local power station online at the time. This may have been caused by a lightning strike on the switchyard or an automatic shutdown to protect generation assets after the loss of 1,000 megawatts of generation of the Eyre Peninsula. The 2 interconnectors then shut down to protect the network. There has been unprecedented damage to the network, i.e. bigger than any other event in Australia, with 20 plus steel transmission towers down in the north of the state due to wind damage between Adelaide and Port Augusta. The electricity network was unable to cope with such a sudden and large loss of generation at once. Now what's kind of fascinating about that advice is that the word wind is used once, and it's talking about the wind damage to the power lines, and the word renewable doesn't even feature. The interconnectors were down, there was a massive loss of transmission towers, and one of the other generators, one of the other fossil fuel generators wasn't online. And that's why there was a blackout. And you know, we may think we've perfected the world in the 21st century, but we live on a world which has increasingly large natural events that happen, and if one of them knocks out 20 transmission lines while you've got your 2 interconnectors down, then you're going to have a blackout. And what did not contribute to that blackout was the reliance of South Australia on renewables. So let's then wind forward to the weekend. So on the weekend, I don't know if any of you noticed, but it was a little hot, you know. And it turns out it was globally hot. 15 of the hottest places on the planet were right here. And it was very predictable. It was going to be bloody hot. I knew, and I'm not a market forecaster for electricity, I knew because I had watched my Bureau of Meteorology app on my iPhone, that it was going to be bloody hot on the weekend. Probably unprecedented temperatures on the weekend. I mean, that was just clear. And you know, the theories of jogs and things were revised. Lifestyle was revised for the weekend. The South Australian electricity producers knew that it was going to be bloody hot on the weekend. And one of them is a French company, which owns probably the most efficient gas-fired power station down in South Australia, called Pelican Point. Pardon me. And Pelican Point has, I think, 3 generators at that site. There's a steam turbine and there are 2 gas turbines there. Gas turbines can turn on in 20 minutes, by the way. 20 minutes is what the national regulator says is the start-up time for a gas turbine. But you see, that French utility company also owns a big fat coal-fired power station. I think it's a coal-fired power station in Victoria. Yes. And if you are providing electricity in the very dysfunctional privatised market that is the Australian national electricity market, you pump it out electricity most days on a sort of, you know, cover the costs kind of a price. Sometimes you get paid a little more, sometimes you get paid a little less, but most of the time you're pumping out electricity on a kind of cost plus a bit. But there are these times, you see, as a private provider, there are these times when the spot price goes from $200 a megawatt hour to $10,000, or sometimes more than $10,000 a megawatt hour, and they are the moments, as a private provider of electricity, you are just praying for. They are the moments that it makes it all worthwhile for you. And they kick on those super high spot prices when capacity is reached all over the market, just completely at capacity, and that final little bit of power is just priced at the extreme high levels. And so our friends in Engie, who own those 2 gas-fired turbines in South Australia, could, like I could, looking at no doubt their iPhone, or it's probably something somewhat more sophisticated, could see this amazing opportunity that spot prices for electricity would be going through the roof in this unprecedented heat wave we're going to have. And the really interesting thing about the South Australian and the Victorian markets, and I'm sure Mark will go into it in more detail, is that those markets, most of the time, their energy capacity, their energy needs are reasonably stable, but they have these huge surges over the summer month, both those states. Over the summer months, they have a massive spike in demand. And so energy companies are thinking, well, do I bother building something that I'm only going to be turning on for 2 months a year? And often they're saying no. And in fact, the company that owns the Pelican Point have basically mothballed one of their generators. They decided not really to ever use it, because the way they see it is you're far better off being paid $10,000 a megawatt hour for your one generator producing X amount of power when the spot market hits, than turning on your other generator, resolving the energy crisis, and seeing the spot price for electricity drop from $10,000 a megawatt hour to $300 a megawatt hour. You see, that makes no sense to them to sell electricity at that point. It makes no sense for them to resolve the crisis. They are far more economically benefited from actually having an absolute crisis. Who cares if a couple of people black out, get blackouts? Who cares if, in their eyes, if 10, 20, 30, 100,000 people get blackouts? Because as soon as they turn on that next generator, they resolve the crisis. They resolve the crisis, and the amount they get paid, they might be producing twice as much power. But if instead of being paid $10,000 a megawatt hour, you're being paid $300 a megawatt hour, you've just suffered a major loss. And when you realise that the two energy markets in between Victoria and South Australia are also connected, and that in fact by having a large chunk of the Victorian energy production, or in the scheme of things, pumped through the interconnector to South Australia, that also jacks up the prices they're getting for their other fossil fuel generator in Victoria. So they win, 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 win by producing less power. And we have a market that actually encourages a blackout. And that's exactly what happened on the weekend. The energy regulators saw unprecedented power going. The French company that owns Pelican Point said, we're only putting one online at current prices. We're only putting one of our generators online. And so the regulator was running around trying to find power wherever else they could. There was a softening in the amount that was being produced by wind, but they had plenty of power in the system if they could only get that second generator to be turned on. And the market failed. Well, I suppose a privatised market with a natural monopoly is pretty much always going to fail in those circumstances. And then what do we get? We get a lump of coal brought into Parliament and we're told, here's why it all failed, renewables. And here's the answer, more coal-fired power. But you know what? The answer was probably just turning on the power station they had in place and not putting a bunch of people into a blackout. So,
just a few minutes.
What do we do? Well, we cannot get bogged down into just the story that I've told you. Spent ages just telling you. I've just been told about to run out of time because I've been fact-checking the bloody thing that happened on the weekend. But there is an amazing story to tell. It's a story that everybody loves. And that's why the lies are happening at such a rapid rate. And that's why the lies are becoming even more outrageous from the fossil fuel companies and the politicians that love it. People love renewable energy. They love the concept of getting clean power from wind and clean power from solar. And they are super committed to getting that outcome. And pretty much everybody you talk to loves the idea of being able to put solar panels on their roof and getting electricity for nothing. And they like the idea of shutting down ruddy big coal mines that I don't know if you've been to the Hunter Valley of late. I mean, they are obscene destruction on the landscape. And if you think about it, the kind of 17th century approach to power production that is digging huge holes in the ground, ripping out big bits of old black fossilised swamps, sticking them on trains, transporting them half around the world, crunching them up and burning them as a way of producing power, compared to a windmill and a solar panel. Everybody realises that's nuts and it has to end. And so the lies are getting more extreme, and the anger is getting more extreme, and they're trying to vilify renewables. And people don't like big power bills, and they hate blackouts. And so they're willing to lie and lie and lie, the political leaders, to join the blackouts and renewables together to try and tarnish a product that everybody loves. So what do? Well, we have to respond by the positive messaging, and we have to respond by telling people the truth about renewables in a way that gets them excited by it and maintains the excitement and tells them that they are part of the solution, that we've got this amazing alternative. And I think we should be aware of the fact that scare campaigns can be used not just for bad as well. You know, the Medi-Scare campaign, as it was called before the last federal election, had a degree of untruth to it. If you just looked at the basic facts that were floating around, the government had said at the time, we won't possibly attack Medicare, and they gave that rock-solid commitment. But why did the scare campaign work about Medicare? Well, it worked because there were things people could join together underneath that campaign that made them validated. The Coalition have a habit of hacking into public things. The Coalition have a bad record on wanting to attack Medicare. The Coalition tend to lie a lot. And people like to, they're anxious about the loss of something so important as Medicare and universal health coverage. So the Medi-Scare campaign kind of worked in their brains. And they said, you know what, we don't trust those guys. And I don't think you're telling us the truth. And we need to be making them as distrustful and as unaccepting of the lies on renewables, because we've got those underlying truths that we build on. People love renewables. They actually do want to save the planet. They realised it was bloody hot on the weekend, and they know the solution to it isn't coal. And that's our political challenge. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, David. That's great. We'll just invite Mark up to the platform now and see what the next part of his story is. So, please welcome Mark.